guys, I'm Brittany,
I'm Maria.
and welcome to the Be More podcast.
Yes, welcome back. We took last week off.
We did take last week off.
I was away.
Just to tap on this whole idea of like us taking our random times off, I was listening to a podcast that I don't normally listen to, and the two women who host it were talking about how they were people who kind of started, I don't remember their names or any of the information that's relevant to like identify these people or their podcast, because I don't usually listen to it. But they started podcasting. They have a similar podcast structure to the way that our podcast is structured, and the fact that they just get on and talk because they're friends. And they just wrote a book called Big Friendships.
Okay.
And their podcast talks a lot about that, like having a big friendship and how friendships are more complicated than everybody thinks they are and all that fun stuff. And they've had this podcast for a really long time, and they're people that were just like coming into it before it was really a thing, and how they've done it for such a long time. And everybody asks them all the time, like, how do you do? And blah, blah, blah. And what's the hardest part about it? And they were like, honestly, the hardest part about it is literally just scheduling to show up. And they were like, once we show up, it just happens, but scheduling it to show up. And I was like, dang, I'm so proud of us that we are still showing up and doing it. But at the same time, we're like, you know what? We're not trying to make a living off of this. So it's okay if we don't have, we have a couple weeks where we go live our life. So
it's truly just like catching up and talking.
Yeah,
it's not
it's
like
casual.
Yeah. Once you make a job out of some of these things, that's when you're like, Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So. Oh, yep. Once you make a job out of anything that's just enjoyable, things can change. Yeah, things change. So. But this is not what we wanted to talk about today. We had things in mind that we want to talk about today, and it's all stemming from where Maria was last week, and why the reason behind why we were on an episode last week.
Yes, I was at Disney World, but did you see my stories throughout that weekend?
I have not been on social media.
No, that's fine.
At all.
Good. That's actually good for your mental health. So
it is very good for me.
I'm slightly back only because like I am going places, so obviously I want to let people know. That's the art of social media.
That is the whole intention of social media. Show people what you're doing.
So a lot of people got confused with my stories last weekend because I wasn't tagging Disney World. Instead, I was tagging random places around the world. So like the castle, when I went to a Magic Kingdom the first day, I tagged it as like the presidential like palace in the Philippines.
Amazing.
And like me and Erin did it in tandem. So she tagged it, I think she tagged the castle as either Buckingham Palace or like somewhere else. And like we saw this on TikTok where like some other family used to do this all the time and it would confuse people, so we wanted to try it.
And then like
I was on It's a Small World, and I tagged like a place in the Philippines that like my dad lives in, and then I went to Epcot the next day, and I got. Have you seen Turning Red?
Yeah,
the movie. So that's in Toronto, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Turning Red drink that I got, and I tagged Toronto, and then one of my managers was like, "Are you in Toronto?" I'm like, "No, I told you I was going to Disney World, dude."
You want to know what? I 110% endorse this activity.
A lot of people got super confused, and then right after, there's a Ratatouille ride, which I think is like the best ride in the world. I never went on that one because the line is so long.
Oh, maybe that's why.
But I tagged, and right outside it was like after, like right as sun was setting. So I took a picture of this guy and I tagged Paris, France, like right after I was in like Toronto, and everyone was like, "Where are you?"
Amazing.
The chaos I ensued was like really funny. And even Monica last night was like, "Where were you?" Because you kept tagging places other than Disney World. I was like, "I was in Disney World." You guys got like punked.
Which is all the places in the world in one place. So I mean, spot on. Amen.
Too funny. But I had a nice time. It was so hot though down there. It was so hot, even though it was like September. So but I guess like again, like we were saying, like thank God I like left the day I left. It was like Tuesday morning, because that hurricane just
came in that afternoon. The next day. Yeah.
It was like that afternoon it was hitting the coast, and I was in Orlando, so it was fine. But like, man, like one of our high school friends that lives down there, Hadir, she lives in Fort Myers, and just like her siding is just wrecked from her house. Oh, that poor thing. So like it's wild. It's wild down there. But I mean, I had a good time. It was too hot, and
Good.
now it's up here. You can, if you're watching, Brittany's like in a fucking blanket or something. It's fucking cold up here.
It's just it's freezing and it's wet. And I mean, I don't know what I like very, very grateful that I mean, I can't even say that because we don't even know what's going to happen here in the next 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I just I just want to know. I want to know, like, what do we intend to really do about this going forward? And
We
it's
talking about climate
ironic.
change.
Yes, it's ironic because on Wednesday, while I was driving into school, I was listening to a podcast where two people were talking about living in Texas during Hurricane Harvey. Didn't listen to it on purpose, had no idea they were talking about a hurricane, but it was very serendipitous. And there's nothing that we can do about any of this. So what are we going to do about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
How
like
are we
past the point of no return or whatever.
right? How are we going to, and it's been, and there's another hurricane that's making its way up to Mexico right now. How I just
There's nothing we can do unless the government says we can do something. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, but I mean, there's nothing we can do anyway. So it's like, how do we approach survival as humanity when all of this is starting to happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, obviously there's no answer.
There is no
It's just
answer, but it's
a scary thought.
it is, and it's a big question. And the reality of the future of human existence is that we have to start calculating these things. Like the question becomes, I mean, we're not there yet, but we'd be really ignorant to not think this way. What happens when Florida becomes inhabitable? We're not that far away from that, because now people are going to be rebuilding their houses and living through these things. And then what's going to happen next hurricane season, which is not a long time from now. Like,
No,
first of all, hurricane season is just starting, isn't it? Or is it just ending? Like, we still have months more to go of this.
Actually, is it ending? I can't remember. I mean, I don't
remember.
I think
I feel like it's September,
I don't know.
October.
Yeah, so it must be just ending. I don't think people with anything, right? Or with everything, I don't think people grasp the severity of where we're at in like these climate times, you know? Like we're not supposed to be getting these like major storms. Like yes,
Like,
the US gets like obviously the US gets like every natural disaster, I feel like. But like not to this extreme. Like hurricanes used to be just like, oh, just like stay home, like, and don't like go out, like it's dangerous. But like
there's gonna
not
be a
to
lot
the
of rain. Yeah,
but like not to the extent of like stay home and board your house.
Yeah, I learned what apparently learning new terms related to the weather. There's something called a gale, GALE, which is like something it's like related to like
squall.
Like,
do you know what squall is?
No.
When that's first started
What's
coming
a
out, I was like,
squall?
what's a squall? I
What
think
is
it's
a
like
squall?
wind and snow. Like heavy wind and snow. I could be wrong, but like I
That's
used
a
to get
fun word.
last winter or the winter before, it would like those like emergency things would pop up on my phone.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, there's a squall in the next 2 hours. I'm like, what the fuck is a squall?
Yeah, well, there's a gale warning right now in
That was a gale.
the Long Island area, and it's like it's related to like little like when tidal waves like they're bigger, but they're not like big enough to like
be a tsunami.
So yeah, so they're like
terrifying. That's my worst
they're like
fear.
sending warnings for like up to 4 or 5 feet waves coming in over the next 24 hours.
I'm not trying to get a tsunami in America.
Correct. That's that's average person height. Like, and that's when you're talking about average. Oh no, I gotta plug my computer in. Average person height with like water is not that's doing some damage. Like
that's my worst fear is a tsunami.
Honestly, I agree with you.
Oh my god, I'm getting like chills just thinking about like those tsunami type waves.
Like, sorry, I'm frantically struggling to plug my computer in, friends. But no, what do you
what do you want, like
what do you do? You don't do anything. And I mean the only difference, right? It's not to say that water doesn't come in with like the hurricanes, right? Like we see all the water coming in, but at least there's a pattern. It develops slowly. Like you start to watch it. I mean, it doesn't really develop. It's not that slow, but you can see what's happening with it, right? And it doesn't go over your head. What do you, I just, and this is where my brain gets to all like, what do we
don't.
what do? We don't.
We don't, unfortunately.
And
we don't get paid enough to do this shit.
I remember I had a really good friend in college. Sorry, my brain needed a second. I had a really good friend in college who always used to pack I have like a little unicorn horn going on right now. She always used to pack like an emergency evacuation bag or whatever, or like a disaster bag. And my brain, I think that because of where we live, I think it would be different if we lived more inland, but in my brain, it's like the disasters that we're really the realities of the disasters that we're really facing are related to water. And how do you prep for that? You're not going to take a huge backpack with you and put it on your back to trek through the water. You know what I mean? Like how do you, water is one of those, I need to buy a kayak. Like that's how I need to prepare for something. I just don't know how.
You prepare for water.
And I don't know why, but like water, the idea of water and water from the ocean and specifically scares me more than the idea of like other natural disasters, because I just feel like
the ocean is vast and
correct,
deep.
And like I feel like fires, natural fire disasters happen, you have somewhere to go, more or less. You know what I mean? Like there's more. When it comes to water, like flash floods,
you can't go anywhere.
What are you doing? You have no time. So
where do you go?
I really hope that the more, this is very like catastrophic thinking of me, but the more that I look at the next generations of humans, the more that I look at the future of our world, like it's got to be coming to an end. Like, am I ridiculous for thinking these things? Like,
or it might just be like a cycle. You know how Earth goes through its cycles?
Like, I mean, true. I don't think the world is coming to an end. I think our existence and living on the world or being able to be here might be coming to an end. I don't mean like tomorrow, but I mean over the next
couple generations or something. Yeah. It might. I mean, with the way that we're treating it, if we're not like doing something to revert some, damage, then I can see that wholeheartedly. And like this is like the start to the end.
That's a fun topic. Things that you think of when you're like hurricanes and natural disasters.
From Disney World to the end of society.
Back to that because I think that for all the ways that we really criticize our society in many of our previous episodes, because we're Americans and that's what we do. When you compare the path that we're on with nature and the environment and how things are going tragically wrong and spinning out of our control, there are some ways that you have to give us credit for as a society, that we're making strides in dealing with the issues that we have amongst our communities. Perfect example, the way that Disney is handling trying to have representation of people of color, specifically Black people, in their movies. Even going on to talking about, did you watch Hocus Pocus 2?
I've never watched Hocus Pocus 1, so I can't comment. No, I
want to log off right now and keep you here by yourself. The new Hocus Pocus movie, I mean, if you watch the first Hocus Pocus movie, there's not a single person of color like in that entire, like on the screen in that entire production. But
that's like standard 90s Disney movie.
Correct. Yeah. There's a lot of representation of people of color in the new movie, which great. But specifically, the reason why Maria and I wanted to talk about this is because when she was getting ready to leave for Disney, we were having a conversation about what had debuted. So take the lead on that. Go for it.
So, oh my God, what's her name? Chloe, Haley, Bailey. What is her name?
The actress.
Yeah.
I actually don't even know.
Because she's part of a duo with her sister, like a singing group. I don't remember if it's Chloe or Haley. So I'm one sec. I think it's Haley. It's Haley. So Haley Bailey, who is a Black woman, um, is the lead role for Little Mermaid. So she's Ariel. And I was telling Brittany, and I think I sent you a video or something. Did I
No,
send you
but
a
I
video?
found it.
You found it. I'm sorry.
I
Yeah.
was online and it came up and I was
Okay,
like, oh,
great.
this must be what Maria was talking about. I don't go online enough to find things. And then I
Yes.
randomly go online and see things.
Great. So there's a TikTok compilation and like just a bunch of TikToks of like little like Black girls and even like Black boys that are like that weren't expecting like a Black princess to appear when their parents were like, "Oh, you should see and watch, sit down and watch this like trailer." And then all of a sudden the girls and the boys are just like, "Oh my God, she's Black. She's so pretty. That looks like me." I'm like, I like every single one of them. I like cry. Like
Yeah.
it's so nice to see, honestly.
Yeah. And I think the bigger, because it's not to say that Disney's never put forth a person of color or a Black, like Tiana from Princess and the Frog, like
Mm-hmm.
there are characters. I think what makes a big statement here, or two things that make a big statement here, is that it's a live action
Yes.
princess.
Yes.
And it's a princess that's iconically always been seen as a white
As the
person.
princess and like the one of the core princesses.
Right. One of that's very true. One of the original
Disney.
princesses. And I think that I'm very excited for all of the turmoil this is going to bring up.
It's already bringing up.
Because
that's
going right. And going forward more as it comes out, because I think it's going to be a major catalyst for making a statement and making a change.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to go through shit first. But the videos, the facial expressions,
Yeah,
like
many of them, if not
like
all.
I went back and watched it without sound on it, and their physical response, honestly, is the most beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's truly just so like both heartbreaking that it took this long, and like very warming. Because then you also the parents also get their like inner child.
That's
like,
what I'm saying, right? You getting that has to be a very special experience to be a parent, to have grown up and experienced a very white dominated silver screen or a white dominated Disney, and then be able to have your kids have access to something else and something that represents them. And I was listening to an interview with Sarah Niles, who plays I don't remember her actual name on the show, but she plays the therapist on Ted Lasso. And she obviously didn't relate this to Disney at all, but she talked a lot about representation when she saw Black Panther is her favorite movie. And she talked about being her age, and she talked about growing up as a child, and she traveled a lot from I think I want to say she's originally from Trinidad, but that might be a lie. Her family traveled a lot when she was a kid from, I think, definitely Trinidad, because I remember her saying that she had to talk in her Trinidadian dialect when she would visit home. But she would travel from America back to Trinidad very often, and she felt very lost about who she was, because when she came to America, especially when she would visit Texas and live in Texas, she had to,
it's so different.
Code herself, right? She had to do her specific
coding
switch, like her coding work and her code switching. And she brought up how when, the Black Panther movie didn't come out that long ago. And when she watched it, she felt validated as a Black person, because she always felt like when she went to Trinidad, she wasn't Black enough, or she was the wrong kind of Black. But when she came to America, she wasn't white enough. She was too Black. And I, I don't know any better. I'm not a Black person, so I can't relate to this. So I'm happy that I got to hear her speak about it. But she said how, and I think about the movie differently now. Seeing that movie, it was one of the first representations of not only the whole story and the whole identity of a Black person, including their background and their experiences and their family members, and like giving them a full whole being, but it represented more than just a monoculture in Black culture. Like that there were different types of Black cultures that were evident and all existing. And
for sure. Yeah.
That I think is like the next step of where we really have to start going. It's not going to be enough to just, it's not enough to just show somebody who's a person of color or a Black person on the screen. They have to be a full-fledged person. And
and not the
and
stereotypical.
right, not the stereotypical. And that's where Disney has to get, like, they're gonna have to do more work. But I
think they've started though. I mean,
they're trying.
With Raya and the man, what is the full movie name? Raya and the Last Dragon or whatever. That was
I wanted to watch that. I haven't seen it yet.
That's a Southeast Asian princess. Like, and like I'm Southeast Asian. Like like I'm from that region. Granted, obviously it's not fully like, there are instances where I related, obviously, because of the culture down there in Southeast. And then there's also Coco, which I also related to because the Spanish colonized the Philippines. And then there's also Turning Red, which is also like a hyphenated like Asian, like you're Asian and Canadian, or like I'm Asian and American, like the two like identities there. So it's like they are trying, thankfully, because like now I'm seeing the representation that I wanted to as a kid, as opposed to like, I mean, I love Mulan, but I'm not Chinese, you know, like Mulan obviously is one of my, if not my favorite Disney princess growing up, because it was my only representation, even though it wasn't fully me.
Right.
So now that there's like Raya, who's like Southeast Asian, or like, you know, a hyphenated Asian, like, you know, like May and Turning Red, like kids now have these identities to like hold on to, which I think is great.
Yeah, and they're fully developed identities. It's
right, 100%.
It's really, just listening to her speak about that made me realize I watch TV a little differently now, because you know, you don't know what you don't know. You don't have the awareness until you have the awareness.
Especially as a white person, I'm gonna
definitely say. You're because I'm why would I, you know, why would I think about that? But I think it's really important that we become people who, and I think that I'm going to say this in my respect, even though I think it would be across all white people, but my part of my role now is to keep an eye out for that and make sure that I'm in support of the places where there's fully represented identities of people of color in shows. And I don't know, I really also just think that we need more of that, and more white people need to get themselves in a position to, like, if you don't fully feel comfortable being around people who are different cultures, start watching TV shows of people that are fully identified. Like, even, oh my God, I can't think of the name of the show. Never Have I Ever. Mindy Kaling's show. Like, to give you a little bit of, it's when you watch shows like this that are people who are people of color that have really strong roots and traditions in other cultures around the world, but they're full-fledged Americans at the same time. You know what I mean? Like they're balancing the difference between those two things.
Yeah, I go to therapy for this shit because it's so hard. So yeah, like,
yeah, but you get so much perspective, and it frustrates the hell out of me. I was having a conversation
when people don't understand that like this is a thing that I have to go through as a person, that like I have to code switch when I'm at work versus where I'm personally in my life, and like that in itself is so, like, to have representation of that, to say like, oh, you're not alone, like this is so common, is just such like a, like, oh, okay, I got this, like this is just not a me thing. But even though I have to go to therapy for it, but like that's beside the point.
But I mean it's happening now, right? You still have to had to live your life so much with that.
Exactly.
And you're just, in my mind, I'm just gonna speak from the white person perspective, and this is like a little bit of a me standing on a pedestal here.
I'll correct you
and preaching to the white people. No, this is like directed at white people.
Oh, okay.
Like, you have access to all of this stuff now, all of these other ways for you to push the boundaries and being slightly uncomfortable and like watching something entertaining, but in context underlying, you're learning about how to be around people who are not like you. You're learning about the lives of people who are not like you, even though you're watching a comedy show. And what's really beautiful, like, and I'm just putting Never Have I Ever in that context. What's beautiful about it is when you follow a story, especially a lot of these like coming of age stories, or a story like The Little Mermaid, for example, you're following a major theme that any human can relate to, right? Like what I love about The Little Mermaid so much, and why I connected to her so much, she's my favorite Disney princess, even though there's a lot of stuff effed up with her. And why I also love Mulan is because they, this is relating to my identity 100% as a female. They don't answer to authority because authority limits them for being female, right? That's like the big thing that, you know, they go out and do whatever they need to. And that is a theme, those themes around love, those themes around having to experience the journey of identifying yourself and flourishing and realizing that self-identity, regardless of any other way that we define ourselves. Those are all experiences that we have as humans, like emotions and crises and cognitive experiences that we have as humans. So how fortunate are we to be able to have these stories that we can tap into and start to relate to people who are different than us through that common experience. And then while we're walking that journey with those characters, we're learning about we're learning about experiences and cultures that are different than our own. Like, you know what I mean? It really is, it's a learning experience. And I think that as somebody who is white, if you don't want to if you don't want to read the books, if you don't want to actively do anti-racist work, you can start educating yourself and becoming somebody who starts to push that spectrum by just doing something as simple as like choosing to watch a TV show that's not going to have characters who 100% walk the line of your life experiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, and if you, I think the bottom line too, when people listen to this and they get offended, if you get offended by whatever Brittany just said, you're the problem. You know, like start there. Like if you get mad that people are telling you this is a good thing, because I see a lot on the internet, obviously, and just like in real life, like why do they like what does representation matter even mean? Like what do you mean? Like be grateful that like you just have like a side, you know, like a side character somewhere or whatever, like not like a main thing. I'm just like, but think about it the other way. Like if you're clearly getting offended that you like a black woman is a princess, then you clearly can see representation matters. Like, you know, like it's just
Right.
like
And
you
you have your own issues of systemic racism that are deeply rooted in you that you need to address.
right. And like but like it's literally over their head. The way that
No,
you like just stated everything, like you can, and a lot of people do this, obviously, like preach and like, you know, put themselves on like white people, hey, white people, like do this and this, like they won't
right.
understand. And that's
No,
like
and
the worst
that's
part.
true. But so you want to know what? Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's just be like, someone needs to get real creative, and I think that happens already, and like subliminally start messaging this in and being like, here's your characters of like white cast, but we're also going to start throwing in these other characters as you go down the line. You want to know what show does that really well? And it is one of my like, this is my stupid guilty pleasure, and I literally on days all during the week when I have a shitty day, I come home and I just watch it because
What
if
did
you
you
get
say?
sucked into something else, then you're not. The show Dynasty on Netflix. Have you ever
I have
heard of
no
that
idea
show?
what that. I was gonna say BoJack Horseman, but go
The
ahead.
entire, I mean, if you're gonna ask somebody who's never had to dive into anything like that before to start at BoJack Horseman, we're definitely going nowhere. But the Dynasty show is about a really wealthy family from Atlanta, and
Okay.
they're all white.
Uh-huh.
But the way that they start, there are people who are Hispanic Latinx and there are people who are black, and they start incorporating them into the show. Like there's like 5 seasons of it. They start incorporating them to the show, and then they start building out bigger, fuller identities of those people as the show goes on. And then they end up making them like more main characters in the show as the show goes on.
Okay, cool.
There's still a lot, like, I'm not saying it's the greatest example of this ever. There's still a lot of negative things. There's still a lot of like being able to easily like assist them and pulling them in and out of the storyline. But there's, whether it's intentional or not, there is effort in making a fully identified actual human being out of people of color, aside from just the like major white characters. So that's what we need to do more of, I think. I feel like you need to
Get a
and when I
white
say
centric
you,
like cast,
you
and then
right,
all of
you
a
know
sudden start like implanting.
yeah. And you want to know what? Let me ask you this question, because I'm
Sure.
super curious about this.
Sure.
And anybody who's listening who happens to be somebody who is Latinx, Hispanic, I want to know your thoughts on this too. There is another approach that you can take to this, which is like the modern family approach.
Oh, So I've never watched Modern Family, but like
I haven't watched it in fruition, the entire thing, but the
I know the
episodes that I've
premise.
seen, the way that they bring in people of color, I can't remember the name of the actress, but they become the butt of a joke. It's very white centric. It's very,
Mm.
I mean, the
You talking
dad,
about Sophia Vergara or whatever?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The dad, who's the
That's how
dad
you
from
say her last
Married
name.
with Children, who's literally the exact same character he was in that show, um, is a very white man.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up marrying a woman who's a very not white woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then his son they end up having a daughter who's, I don't actually know what type of background she is, but she's not white. And they pull them into the story, but it ends up all of it stemmed from like making the white person feel comfortable. There's just other
Oh.
characters that are, you know what I mean? Like that. So
Yeah.
that's
Okay. Okay.
and it's making jokes. It's like bringing up conversations that are difficult conversations, but they don't make the white person feel bad about the conversation. So it's, you know what it's very protected and sheltered. And like, I don't know if those shows are doing any good because you know what I mean? Like you're not
Yeah.
changing.
You're not changing anything. If anything, you're like,
You're saying it's acceptable
yeah, to like
almost.
learn this way, you
So
know?
I feel like
It's I mean, that was also like when Modern Family was out, it was like it's not now, right? Like now, like I feel like people want that like explicit, like this is a person of color, not
right,
like the butt of the joke, you know?
right,
But back
for
then, I guess
sure.
that's how you had to ease people into the idea of having a
I guess
non-white
for it not to become
male
something that
character.
gets pushed
Even
away
like
from.
even like Game of Thrones right now, the like prequel or whatever, people are like bugging. People
Because
are
of
bugging.
the royal family that's black.
Yeah, people are straight bugging.
And
And I'm
there is
like,
a black character who's also gay,
yeah,
a
like
black male character that's
I
gay.
haven't watched it. I haven't really watched Game of
Dude,
Thrones, but like it is on my list. I've been like people like keep telling me, here's the thing. I'm going on a tangent. If you
go
tell
for
me
it.
to continually watch something, I am stubborn where I'm just like, no. So
I
if you
get
just
that.
back off, I will
You'll be
eventually
like,
watch
I
it.
wonder.
Yeah,
That's
now
interesting. I
now
get that.
especially with the prequel
Respect.
out, now I'm just like, oh, maybe this is like the time that I want to like actually watch it. But
You
I
should
think it's
watch the
like
prequel first.
that's what I want to do. It's like still like going, right? It's ongoing
Yeah,
like
yeah.
every week.
It's enough degrees of separation away that
Hmm.
doesn't really connect a lot in any way, shape, or form.
It's
That's
just
like, oh my God,
based
to
on like one of the families, correct?
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like 300 years prior to the
Before everything.
storyline of, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's as of right now, there's nothing really directly connected. And I would recommend watching it's like when you watch you start watching Star Wars and you watch
Mm.
them in the order and then you're like, wait, I should have watched them. Like, I don't know what happens from beginning to end. I would
Right, right.
recommend watching the prequel, but I understand because sometimes when things get a lot of
Hype.
accolades, you're like,
It's yeah, especially people are like bugging me to watch it. I'm like, now I'm just like
yeah,
out of
no.
fury.
I think
But anyways, there are a lot of people of color in that, or like
there are,
enough
and
for people to
it's
like be like,
not even
why
just that they're people of color. There are people of color in very high standing roles. There's people
that
of
people
color
are bugging. People are
married to
bugging.
very important white people. There's
Uh-huh.
people of color who have not who
Hmm.
don't meet the stereotypes of what you would say for a person of color. And that's what makes it just freaking beautiful.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't understand like I one day I just want to understand the psyche of someone that like takes offense to these things. I just don't understand how this personally affects you in any way.
It's fear and safety. If it's
I think it's
possible out there,
stupid.
yeah, I don't disagree with you, but if it's possible out there, it's possible near me, right? And how does that going to impact me? I'm afraid of what would happen if this happened around me. All of it,
Dumb.
it it amazes me how. Do you know who Willie Nelson is?
Who?
Willie Nelson, the
The
singer, Willie
singer?
Nelson.
The
Yeah, he
singer.
lives.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. He does. I don't want to say like honky tonk, but he gets into like honky tonk stuff, and then
Mhm.
he gets
Mhm.
into all of this very faithful music that he does. It's all
Yeah.
very southern.
Yeah.
But I listened to him I hope that in this episode you guys are getting a good idea of like all the ridiculous span of things that I listen to. But his family put out like a family album, and I started listening to it, and I started listening to his son, and then I was like, I'm curious like what they have to say about their music. So I found a talk that he did with his son, and I started listening to it, and I mean, Willie Nelson's got to be like into his 80s or 90s, if not more than
He's
that
old now.
Old man. And he talked about how he quoted, who was that? What president was that? Was that who's the president that was like, the only thing we have to fear is fear yourself and their
Oh
stuff?
Lord have mercy.
I can like hear his voice saying it in my head on the recordings that they have.
The only thing to fear is fear itself. Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, there we go. That seems that aligns with like knowing who that president was much better than where my head was going. And he quotes him. He talks about, oddly enough, he talks about the power of having faith and manifesting the life that you want to have, and how like worry. He was talking about this in relation to all of his very spiritual music that he's done over his entire career, and he talked about how worry is what makes us sick and holding on to it, and talked about how you can manifest things by just thinking it and being with it truly, like fully, and then letting it go and not worrying about it again. And
that makes sense. Yeah.
And how fear gets in our way of all of that, and how deeply rooted we all are in fearing everything, because once you realize you have no control of anything, what do you hold on to? And then fear just finds its way into everything. And
that's just complete nihilism.
Yeah, I had a real come to Jesus moment when he started talking about all of this, because I was like, oh my gosh, I can relate to this so much right now. I think that, to come back to the like, why do people have an issue with this? All of the fear, and the worst part of this is all of the fear that was instilled in people about people of color and people who were different from them, from honestly through the years of the 1900s. I feel like really just put the nails in the coffin on all of that. I think that there's just so much fear around that. And like we talked about in our last episode, where you're dealing with the old politicians, when we're living in a world where the people who oversee the systems that we are living within are people who are like direct products of that time frame. That's why. And I hallelujah for, I can go in and out about like why television's terrible, but hallelujah for having it become such a foundational part of our pop culture, because it has such a chance to, because we as humans love stories and we need the escapism and we need to be entertained. It has such an amazing opportunity to be something that projects us into the future in a way that we can all have that like equity and be represented. I mean, whether the future will be there, because I'm literally watching the rain just endlessly, or whatever future is available to us. You know what? If that were the case, if we were heading in that direction and there was going to be a sense of true unity and humanity amongst humans, and then like the world was to end, it would be like a very like,
of course,
let's go. You know what I mean? Like a moment of being like, of
course, like
we
did
our
peace.
Job.
Yeah.
Right. Like we did our job and then the world ends.
That sounds about right for humanity. Like we achieve like the world peace, or like very close
Talk
to it.
about having a fucking like epic novel. Like that's an Odysseus story right there.
Yeah. 100%.
One other thing that I just want to bring to the attention of the masses, talking about like the world ending, because the world is just cool. And science is just cool. So it wasn't that long ago that we were having the conversations about Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
For friends who don't remember the premise of the movie, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but essentially this massive asteroid is hurling at the Earth, and it's like, what do we do? And did you hear about what happened over the weekend?
Like there's a real world Don't Look Up. Did you talking about that? I just saw like a headline. I didn't read anything about it though.
Okay. So no one freak out. Everything's fine. My brother, shout out to my brother and the really cool work that he does.
Who's an actual rocket scientist.
Who is legitimately a rocket scientist. So I learned a lot of cool nerdy stuff, and I got to watch this really awesome thing because he works in the rocket science industry. So he works really close to the thing that happened. So let me start here. So NASA, everyone knows NASA does all the space science stuff, like that's granted. So there are 3 different companies, laboratories in the US that focus on, I'm just going to blanketly state it as like the space sciences. 2 of them are owned by NASA directly. One of them is Goddard. The other one is called JPL.
Okay.
So remember when we started talking about, we talked about like, where does GPS come from and all the stuff with like the government, like, and that show with Adam.
Yeah, because I can't figure that out in my head.
And we talked about how like a lot of it is stemmed from like government projects.
Yes.
So like NASA and all the space scientists, a lot of the space science stuff has been developed through, and this is all stuff my brother was talking to me about, and I love this shit, was a lot of it was developed through technology that was originally utilized by the Navy. So the Navy, and which if you think about it, makes sense, right? If you think about like space and the ocean, like I see a lot of parallels potentially there, right?
100%. Yeah, because we don't know like the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, and like you can't control the environment, like all of those fun stuff. You're just trying to survive and investigate. So the other body that exists that helps develop ideas and work in space science is called APL. They're not directly owned by NASA, but they work in partnership with them. And my brother works for APL. So APL was the one who successfully completed the mission that happened over the last week. To reference the movie Don't Look Up, in the movie, they try to send this robot up to try to influence the projected direction of travel of this asteroid, or like have an impact on what's happening to the asteroid. Well, for the first time ever in human existence, our space scientists were able to successfully launch a robot from the Earth, send it up to space, and have it directly collide into an asteroid. Not the asteroid that was coming to the Earth, but they were able to control the entire mission.
That's pretty cool.
It's similar to the way you think about like this type of technology stems from like the way they use missiles in the Navy, right? Like they use the location system on it to be able to make sure it's hitting the target. Similar technology, but this was the first time ever that they were able to control that entire from launch to impact. And I watched it in like live streamed with my brother, like the 5 minutes of watching the camera on the robot go right into this asteroid. It was ridiculous. So it made, the second that we watched it, I looked at my brother and I was like, is it a coincidence that the movie Don't Look Up just came out? Did people know that you guys were like working on this?
Yeah.
So now there's like all of these questions. But
that's funny.
It's the beginning of, if there is, it's kind of funny how we have all these natural disasters that are happening on the Earth that we don't know anything to deal with, but like if something comes from the sky, we're starting to figure out how to deal with it. But it's the first of a long journey of us being able to have influence over the things that are around the Earth and be able to have some type of like defense mechanism
from the
universe. Yeah.
Which is so scary to think about. I hate space.
Isn't it ridiculous that nothing has, knock on wood, that nothing has happened in such a long time?
I mean, how old
when
is
you
the
think
Earth?
Of
right?
Like, billions, what it was like 3 billion, 3.8 billion or something ridiculous.
When was like the Ice Age?
Not that long ago.
Because then that's compared to that. Right, and compared to that, right? So like maybe we still have a ways to go if you think about it that way.
But it's just crazy.
But
it's like, it really is wild when you think about how much stuff is out there. How many things, how much stuff is out there, yet we're all that the frequency of them interjecting or there being any type of connection between things is so small. It's wild
to think about.
You can't. How do you argue with the fact that there's some type of divine calculated something when
like
all
truly like in the Goldilocks like whatever,
right, when all of those not only can all of us in this very minute scale, right, more or less like function together without, catastrophic ends, but these massive things that are literally out in nothing can have coexistence, which brings me back to the question of wrapping this all up. When you come into that understanding of having that divine sense, divine greater power, that calculated being overseeing everything and helping things function, on that level of a scale, we struggle as human beings, as living creatures, to not have those moments with other living creatures that we're around. And if planets that are living things can survive at that level and not intervene with like the greater calculation of what the divine, intelligence is trying to do, why as humans are we constantly fighting with that divine intelligence and making collisions when they don't have to be there?
People's egos?
Yes.
I would assume.
Yeah, 100%. The ego is the worst thing that's ever happened to the brain.
Yeah.
So we're starting one Disney princess at a time.
Yes.
And one Disney trip at a time.
Yeah. For sure.
And we'll see what comes first. The end of systemic racism in our country, or the end of the world.
I truly hope
I'm drinking my coffee to that.
Yeah, I truly hope I see the end of systemic racism in some future before that.
It's ridiculous when you think about I just heard somebody say this, that when we work for a cause in our life, or we have a passion to work towards any cause in our life, we go so hard for it. And the greatest thing that we need to realize, and the hardest thing to realize, is that it may never come to a resolution in your lifetime.
I can say that 100%.
And the amount of, it's great because I think it's a good balancing point for like all millennials who have a cause. It puts you in a place to be like, I can give myself some grace with this.
It was a very hard lesson to learn that for me, because I have my Filipino American group, and like the one thing I just really want for that community, for my community, is to like have that, like have it solid and have a foundation of it and like build it. But like it's not like I see in my lifetime, but like not in my tenure as like the founder of it and like the head of it, like
I get that.
Yeah, so it's like I've taken it to a place where I think it can thrive. It's just now I have to put it into the hands of other people, and that's when you're just like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah,
That's when you're like,
yeah,
because it's just like, this is my passion, and it always will be. But like, I don't like, it's the reality of you are only one person, and like you only have so much ability that like you can't trust yourself to like put this all the way through like the goal line.
It's a beautiful curse.
It really is
to have that level of, and it relates to every topic that we've talked about thus far on this episode. In that,
for sure,
it takes lifetimes and decades for planets to change, for society to change, for systems to change, and
it's not instant gratification that we're used to,
right?
And that's the hardest part.
That's the paradox we live in, right? We live in a society that's about the instant gratification, but we're dealing with these things that you're pushing water up a hill. So I don't know. We talked about a million things today. I have no idea what my summary is for this. Yay for representation, and yay for science, and yay for the development of our society through use of both of those things.
Agreed. Cool. We're good. Brittany's doing a little dance over here.
We're good. Thank you guys for hanging with us. I don't know what you took from today's episode, but hopefully it was something good.
Okay, bye.